the experience of God in the here and now, that is the grand adventure that the mystic pursues. Today I will continue to take up the path that has led the Christian mystics to that very goal. I take it up so that you can follow that path very specifically in their footsteps, and that you can also know that in the dispensation of Aquarius, there are some of the practices of the saints that have been superseded by the teachings of Saint Germain. So far, I have discussed two elements common of Christian mystics. The first is their pursuit of the indwelling presence of God. The Christian mystics believe that all men by nature are like God, and that within everyone there is a spark of the divine. They also believed in the indwelling Christ. This Christ, they said, can be formed or born within each of us. The second element common to the mystics is their pursuit of direct intercourse with God through contemplation and prayer. I mentioned to you yesterday that I call this contemplation meditation, and the forms of prayer so essential are devotional prayer, whereby we give our love and our all to God, and invocative prayer, whereby we invoke or call forth the allness of God and His love. The prayer of the mystics was not just the repetition of a prescribed set of devotions. The mystics sought and found a profound and unceasing communion with God that literally set their souls on fire. The third element common to the mystics is their pursuit of a threefold path of ascent to God. This threefold path consists of, as I said, purgation, or the purging of the soul of all that is unlike God, illumination, displacing ignorance and the poisons with the light of God, and finally union, the union of the soul with her Lord. These stages can take place simultaneously, and not every mystic experiences every stage. Don't think of these mystics of centuries ago. You are the mystics of the Aquarian age. You are the mystics of this decade and this hour. Yesterday I began to discuss with you the process of purgation. The mystics described the purgative stage as a battle between the false self and the true self. Don't ever assume that you have passed that stage. It's a very dangerous assumption to make, because the fallen self, the carnal mind, and the dweller will never say die. So always assume that in the most unlikely moment, the false self is going to pop up and put down the true self before you even realize it. The path of purgation is a path of the imitation of Christ. When you imitate Christ and you mirror His life and work and His great love and healing power, you are displacing the not-self with a true Christ self, and thereby that Christ is being formed in you. But even amidst the greatest sufferings, the mystics saw that path as one of pure joy. Today we have the violet flame, the gift of beloved Saint Germain, to help us through the purging process. And the violet flame is surely the joyous flame, the all-consuming flame of God. It is our greatest comfort sent to us from the Comforter, the Holy Spirit, and from Saint Germain. And so I'd like to pick up where I left off yesterday, which was with the subject of fasting. All of the saints and mystics of the ages have fasted as a very natural inclination and response to God, the desire to be self-emptied for a greater and more profound and sensitive communion with God. It is absolutely true that when you set aside the denser foods, you have a much greater inner peace and a greater communion with the lights of all eternity. Fasting can assist the work of the violet flame. Fasting is advocated in the spiritual traditions of East and West. It has been a regular practice among Christian monastic communities. For instance, the poor Clares of San Damiano ate only one full meal a day, except on Sundays and Christmas, when they were allowed to have 2 full meals. The Poor Clares were an order founded in the 13th century by St. Clare, a disciple of St. Francis. In addition, the Pope forbade the Poor Clares to eat any meat. That was a wise Pope. St. Clare, however, showed discretion in her fasting rules. She explained that exceptions should be given for younger sisters, those who are weak and those who are serving outside the monastery. John Climacus wrote of the virtues of fasting. Detachment from the things perceived by the senses means the vision of things spiritual. I'm certain there is hardly a soul here today who has not experienced the tremendous contact with God through fasting, even for a day or 3 days or a week. So John Climacus says, fasting ends lust, roots out bad thoughts, frees one from evil dreams. Fasting makes for purity of prayer, an enlightened soul, a watchful mind, a deliverance from blindness. Fasting is the door of compunction, joyful contrition, and end to chatter. An occasion for silence, a custodian of obedience, health of the body, an agent of dispassion, a remission of sins, and the gate indeed, the delight of paradise. Many people who have entered the spiritual path have felt the need to fast and to change their diet, eliminating denser foods like meat and dairy products. Dense foods actually inhibit the ability of the individual cells of your body to carry light. Of course, you have to know when and what to fast on, under the supervision of your health practitioner, as well as your spiritual teacher. But you also need to remember that the goal of fasting and a good diet is to root out and destroy so you can build and plant, as the Lord told Jeremiah. You need to build a strong and vibrant body so you can work the works of God on earth. The 11th century Eastern Orthodox priest, Elias the presbyter, understood the need for balance. He wrote, "The ascetic has to know when and by what means of what foods to treat the body as an enemy, when to encourage it as a friend, and when to succor it as an invalid. Otherwise, he may unwittingly offer to the friend what is proper for the enemy, or to the enemy what is proper for the friend, and to the invalid what is proper for either of the other two. And having alienated all three, he may find them fighting against him in time of temptation. The body is an enemy to us when we begin to crave, the cells begin to crave the old foods that we ate 10 and 20 years ago or when we were children. And so if we listen to those cravings and we respond to them, we are giving in to the enemy. The records of past dietary patterns must be purged as an enemy, because the soul cannot go forward until the body is cleansed of those old momentums which will continually pull her back into the wrong diet. The body is the friend when it is well trained, and when that body is the friend, it will ask for the correct foods, and you will be a friend to your body and give to your body the correct foods. One of the best fasts I know of is to fast on toasted, pressure-cooked brown rice and bancha tea or herb tea. You should be using reverse osmosis purified water if you wish to use water in fasting, or sweet vegetable broth. Here's the recipe for sweet vegetable broth. It's a very supportive broth. It supports your organs while they are self-emptying and purging. You should finely chop your choice of 3 or more sweet vegetables, such as sweet squash, onions, carrots, cabbage, or daikon, which is white radish. Boil the vegetables with 4 times the amount of water without any added salt for about 15 minutes. Then drain off the broth and drink it. Now, you've all heard the expression, it's as plain as the nose on your face. Now I'm going to tell you what is as plain as the nose on your face. And I have something to show you. This is my grocery bag. How about feeling your nose right now? Give a little squeeze to the very end. You know, Rudolph's red nose? Then go up a little further and squeeze here. Think of yourself when you were about between the ages of 12 and 18. And tell yourself right now whether or not your nose today is larger than it was when you were between the ages of 12 and 18. How many think your noses are larger than they were when you were a teenager? Most people's are. I'm talking now about the macrobiotic diet, and I'm talking about the signs of the face that can easily be read according to Oriental diagnosis, which can tell us what is the condition of any and every organ of our body. What concerns me most, and it is a portion of my macrobiotic lectures that I have not delivered, is the many, many keepers of the flame and students of the light that I see whose noses are oversized, because the condition of the nose will tell you the condition of your heart. When you have eaten dairy and dairy fats for a lifetime, and the red meats and sausages, which contain a great deal of fat and produce cholesterol, as you know, this begins to collect around the heart and the arteries of the heart. This takes place gradually, and I'm certain that all of us have known of people or had very close loved ones or dear friends who have had themselves checked by doctors, have been told they were in perfect health, and not long thereafter they dropped dead of a heart attack or of a stroke. What macrobiotics teaches us then is that the accumulation of these fats in the heart shows on the end of the nose. What I would like to tell you right away is that the thickness of the nose at the lower portion of the nose shows the burden that is on the heart. When the nose is thick at the top, when you have added fat, I'm not talking about your bone structure. Some of us have a wide bone structure at the top of the nose, but added fat at the top, that is an indication of the potential for stroke. So some people only have the fat in the lower portion that will indicate that the heart is overloaded with fat, and some will have the fat on top, and some people will have a fat nose from the top to the bottom, showing that they are candidates for both a heart attack and a stroke. I consider this to be the most serious problem of all chelas on the path for the following reason: that you and I need every hour of every day of our assigned allotment of years. And that assigned allotment of years was given to us by the Lords of Karma when we took embodiment. We were told exactly what our lifespan would be, and that we could increase that lifespan by good works, by a spiritual life, and we could decrease it by the wrong vibrations, taking in alcohol, drugs, nicotine, and so forth, and eating the wrong diet. Wonderful light bearers on the path have shortened their lives and therefore foregone their ascension because they didn't have enough time in this world to complete it, while others have extended their lives by 10 or 15 years. Now, sometimes, somewhere on the spiritual path, most people stop eating these heavy fats. But then there is the version of vegetarians who become lacto-vegetarians and do eat a lot of dairy in place of meat. Instead of eating dairy in place of meat, you should be eating fish, the freshest fish you can eat, or no meat at all. So there is a way to deal with this, and it is amazing how you can deliver your body of fats, especially in these most dangerous areas, very quickly. What you need to understand then is this: just because you have stopped eating the wrong foods does not mean that your body is being purged of the layers of that food that you have accumulated in your various organs. Now, it is a myth and incorrect, and I will explain this scientifically in a macrobiotic lecture, that fasting on fruits and fruit juices will purge the body of these substances. On the contrary, they will drive the heavy fats and cholesterol deeper and deeper into the organs. So fruit fasting will not deliver you from that danger zone, but there is something else that will. To eat daikon every day. This is daikon. We should bow before the angel deva of the daikon plant. Now here's the way it goes. You cook daikon just as you would cut up a carrot in pieces. Cook it until it is tender. You can mix it with other vegetables. You can put it in soups. You can be creative with however you want to use the cooked daikon. When you eat cooked daikon, because you have added fire to the plant, and this is true of all foods, that fire makes the daikon more young, and the daikon goes to work and removes the deep-seated fats in every organ of your body, and of course, your heart. The heart and the brain. You can grate daikon fine with a grater, and it will taste very hot. It's a very hot radish to the taste when it is raw. You can grate it, you can put a little shoyu or soy sauce on it or a little salt, and you can chew it and eat it up raw. All you need is a tablespoon, and that's all you'll want. Daikon in the raw form is more yin, and it will deliver from you the more recent fats you have eaten, like today and yesterday and last week, that haven't yet settled deep into the organs. So that's the basic concept of daikon. I myself have been eating cooked and raw daikon religiously daily for any number of years now that I've been on the macrobiotic diet. I've seen my entire body change, as nothing else has ever changed my body, and giving me a freedom, a deliverance, and a lightness. It is difficult to be on the macrobiotic diet when you have to do all of the cooking yourself. But I can tell you that one of the most important things a yogi from India ever told me was that his guru told him that every yogi must cook his own food, putting his own vibration into it and cooking what is right for his body. The macrobiotic diet can be elaborate or simple, but there are basic rules to follow. If you want to maintain health and longevity in this life, you need to cut down on dairy or eliminate it altogether. There are times when you make exceptions, and that's fine. You don't need to be fanatics. But as a rule, it is best to discontinue dairy because that is what is causing the fat in the organs. And the same is true with red meats. So if you can bring your diet into alignment with fresh vegetables, all the various wonderful grains that nature has provided for us, and the wonderful fish and seaweed and broths that you can make from them, you will see a lightening of your consciousness and a healing of your form. I commend you to this. And it's a good idea to go ahead and have a Polaroid picture taken of yourself and to keep it. Keep it somewhere and take it out a year from now and see what's happened to you after you have made daikon your priority on a daily basis. I'm giving you this teaching for your health and because I love you each one very much, and I am truly concerned about your victory, your path, and your ascension. The writings of the mystics tell us that there comes a moment on the purgative path when the intense suffering abates. There's hope for all. The flame of love swallows up some aspect of the lesser self, and the soul moves on to a new level. For example, at that crucial point in her life when Catherine of Genoa was consumed by dismay at her imperfections, she began to suffer from a constant sense of sin. She fasted and put herself through mortifications for 4 years. Suddenly one day, the thought of these mortifications was in an instant taken from her mind, and she was unable to continue them. A similar moment came in the life of the 14th century Dominican friar and mystic Henry Zuzo. His biography, entitled The Exemplar, explains how he put himself through intense torments for 16 years. This fashion of the earlier saints to mortify themselves in their bodies was an act of penance and suffering that they took on, following in the footsteps of Jesus in the hour of his crucifixion. Somehow they knew that such practices brought about a balancing of karma and enabled them to carry also world karma. It was symbolizing to them that they were willing to make themselves also the suffering servant. So for Henry Zuzo, after 16 years of these torturous practices, when his whole nature was tamed and withered, an angel appeared to him on Pentecost Sunday with the welcome whisper, "God wants you to discontinue this manner of life." He lost no time. He lost no time throwing his instruments of torture into the Rhine River. Suffering ceases when the soul has learned her lessons and a certain block of karma has been balanced. Suffering then is the purgative process. If you are suffering in and through something, which you know also means to endure, to suffer something means to endure it and to go through it rather than to sidestep it. If you're in that place, understand that it is a lawful place, a known place on the path of initiation. And so don't say to yourself, why do I have this depression? Why do I have this state of consciousness? What's wrong with me? What's altogether right with you is because you are a Chela, your karma is descending, your negative karma is accelerating. Transmute it, invoke the violet flame. You don't have to flagellate yourself. Just use the violet fire and serve God night and day. The cessation of suffering then marks the moment when the soul is ready for the illuminative stage. Those who believe that the life of mystics is gloomy and sad, said John Arentero, do not know what true happiness is. Indescribable consolations and wonderful illuminations are interwoven amid the many trials. As mysteries are unlocked, the mystic gains a new perspective on his relationship with God and with his fellow men. He experiences a greater sense of the presence of God. His soul mounts to new heights of joy in communion with the Lord. Radha Krishnan, an Indian philosopher, called the second stage of the mystic path concentration. For now the mystic's life is focused entirely on God. His soul desires to be with God and to serve God. The illuminative stage is often marked by visions, ecstasies, revelations, raptures, and other phenomena. Simeon, the new theologian, an 11th century Byzantine poet and saint of the Eastern Orthodox Church, who experienced raptures and visions, wrote, "What word can describe this? I see a light which the world does not possess. Sitting in the cell I see within me the Creator of the world." He saw the Creator seated on the throne in the secret chamber of the heart. He saw the threefold flame and saw it as God. And the Creator talked with him and loved him, and he was nourished by the knowledge of God. The 12th century mystic Hildegard of Bingen described how she was infused with the light of illumination. In the year 1141, a flaming light of great brightness from the open heaven completely flooded my brain, heart, and breast like a flame that does not burn, but warms. Immediately I was illuminated with a complete understanding and exposition of Catholic tomes, both of the Old and New Testament. I did not perceive these visions in dreams or sleeping or in a trance, nor with exterior ears of man or in hidden places, but by God's will beheld them wide awake and clearly with the mind, eyes, and ears of the inner man. Like Hildegard, other mystics reveal that the soul experiences God through spiritual senses, senses beyond the physical senses and the intellect. Through their spiritual senses, mystics have heard or seen God the Father, Jesus, the Blessed Mother, or angels. Joan of Arc was guided by the voice of Saint Michael the Archangel. Francis of Assisi, kneeling before an image of the crucified Christ in the church of San Damiano, heard the Lord urging him, "Go and repair my church." Catherine of Siena conversed with God the Father in a state of ecstasy, and she dictated her spiritual treatise, the Dialogue. The Dialogue was a dictation from God to Catherine. Other mystics did not see visions, but unmistakably felt the presence of God. Teresa of Avila's life was guided by visions and locutions, the term she used to describe directions, revelations, and rebukes from God. But Teresa said she never saw any of her visions with her bodily eyes, and only twice heard God's messages with her bodily ears. She said that sometimes the Lord puts what he wants the soul to know very deeply within her, and there he makes this known without image or explicit words. Origen of Alexandria observed, "We do not think that God speaks to us from outside, for those holy thoughts that arise in our heart, they are the way God speaks to us." The modern-day mystic Mother Teresa of Calcutta said she left her position as a high school teacher to work in the slums because she heard the call of God while on her way to an annual retreat in Darjeeling, India. The message was quite clear, she said. I was to leave and help the poor whilst living among them. It was an order. Guess who gave her the order? Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, a 12th century mystic, said he recognized that Christ had entered his soul only by the movement of his heart. "I confess," he wrote, "that the word has visited me, and even very often. But although he has frequently entered into my soul, I have never at any time been sensible of the precise moment of his coming. He is living and full of energy, and as soon as he has entered into me, he has quickened my sleeping soul, has aroused and softened and goaded my heart, which was in a state of torpor and hard as a stone. It was only by the movement of my heart that I was enabled to recognize his presence and to know the might of his power by the sudden departure of vices and the strong restraint put upon all carnal affections."
You're watching Elizabeth Clare Prophet, world-renowned author and founder of Summit University. Summit University is located at the beautiful Royal Teton Ranch in Park County, Montana, just north of Yellowstone National Park. If you'd like more information, call 800-323-5228. That's 800-323-5228.
Teresa of Avila's description of her first vision is also very instructive. Being in prayer on the feast day of the glorious Saint Peter, I saw, or to put it better, I felt Christ beside me. I saw nothing with my bodily eyes or with my soul, but it seemed to me that Christ was at my side. I saw that it was he who was speaking to me. Teresa said visions like these are represented through knowledge given to the soul that is clearer than sunlight. I don't mean that you see the sun or brightness, but that a light without your seeing light illumines the intellect so that the soul may enjoy such a great good. Teresa added that this vision of Christ helped her to avoid displeasing God because she felt Jesus was always looking at her. One of Teresa's techniques for communing with Jesus was to imagine the figure of Christ within her. Of course, a perfect imaging. Who she was visualizing was not only her Lord Jesus, but her Lord, her Holy Christ self. In her autobiography, she wrote, "It used to happen when I represented, that is, I visualized, Christ within me in order to place myself in his presence, or even while reading, that a feeling of the presence of God would come upon me unexpectedly, so that I could in no way doubt he was within me, or I, totally immersed in him. This did not occur after the manner of a vision." The mystical experience Teresa teaches is open to all. If the soul does not fail God, she said, he will never fail to make his presence clearly known to her. Teresa also said that the mystic is keenly aware that his experiences are gifts from God. He cannot produce them, although he can prepare himself to receive them. I would like to tell you that being a messenger of God and the Ascended Masters is wholly in the tradition of the path of Christian mysticism and of worldwide mysticism. But this particular comment by Teresa so applies to me that I wanted to tell you about it. Because wherever I go, people say, "How do you take dictations?" And I always say, "I don't know how to take a dictation." And that is the truth. And so Teresa says, the mystic is keenly aware that his experiences are gifts from God. He cannot produce them. I cannot produce a dictation. I cannot turn on a faucet and make the water flow. I can only put myself in place and wait upon the Lord. The Lord does it. So I prepare myself to receive dictations by walking the path of the teachings of the Ascended Masters. It is truly a walk in which I say, and I know you say, I of mine own self can do nothing. I cannot take a dictation. It is the Father in me which doeth the work. This is a very good thing to get yourself used to. To be absolutely helpless in God is a wondrous experience. I come helpless to the altar each time I am called to give a dictation. I give my body and mind and soul to God, and the rest you have observed. As an adjunct to Teresa's exercise of visualizing Christ within, the Ascended Master Kuthumi wrote in the book Corona Class Lessons, by meditating on the luminous aura of a saint or an Ascended Master and visualizing that light around you with focused attention, you may draw forth the intensity of your own Christ radiance stored in your causal body. So whatever saint or Ascended Master you commune with or you visualize, the result will always be the same, that your Holy Christ self will enter your temple and draw nigh to you. Teresa of Avila was candid when writing about her visions, locutions, and raptures. She said that during her raptures, without her being able to resist, her soul was carried off. Sometimes even her body levitated. So you see, the mystic path does have its lighter moments. Levitation, Teresa said, happened to her rarely, but when it did, it distressed her because she feared it would increase her notoriety. One time, Teresa was attending a service along with some ladies of nobility, and she began to levitate. I stretched out on the floor, she writes, and the nuns came and held me down. Nonetheless, this was seen. I begged the Lord very much not to give me any more favors that would involve any outward show. He was pleased to hear me because up to the present I have never had this experience again. Maybe the TV show about the flying nun is not so far-fetched after all. In her dialogue, Catherine of Siena recorded this instruction God gave her about levitation. The body is lifted up from the ground because of the perfect union of the soul with me, as if the heavy body had become light. This does not happen because its heaviness has been taken away, but because the union of the soul with me, God, is more perfect than the union between the soul and the body. And for this reason, the strength of the Spirit united with me, God, lifts the body's weight off the ground. It is popular today to equate mysticism with raptures, ecstasies, visions, or even levitation. But the mystics often warned, and so do the gurus of the East, that phenomena are not the goal of the mystical path. They said it is dangerous to ask God for or to expect such experiences, because this leaves us open to projections from our own imagination or from the devil. Author J. Mary Luty writes, although Teresa esteemed mystical phenomena, she was also cautious about them. Not only because such experiences could be counterfeited, but also and especially because she understood the mystical life to involve so much more than peak experiences. For Teresa, the marks of true Christian intimacy with God were first, last, and always the marks of concrete love, the bearing of the cross, that is personal and planetary karma, and the service of one's neighbor. Sensation was not what she was seeking, but transformation in God for the sake of God's service. I would like to share with you a few of the experiences of the mystics that tell us something about the path to union with God. There came a time when God told Henry Zuzo to stop his self-imposed torments because he needed to make progress in a different manner. Zuzo then had an extraordinary experience that to me represents the illuminative stage. This is what his biographer records. It happened once that he was seated in his cell reflecting on spiritual matters. As he pondered the wonders of eternal wisdom, his senses were stilled in ecstasy, and it seemed to him that a princely young man drew near and spoke to him. He said, "You have spent enough time in elementary school. You are ready to take up higher studies. Follow me. I will conduct you to the spiritual graduate school, the highest school that exists in the world, where you will be instructed. This will establish your soul in holy peace and bring your devout beginning to a blessed end." Henry jumped happily to his feet, and it seemed to him that the young man led him by the hand to a spiritual land. After walking across a meadow, they entered a schoolhouse and were received with open arms by the students. When the headmaster heard the uproar being made over this would-be disciple, he said in a true professional style, "Before accepting him as a pupil, I must question him personally." After a short interview, the headmaster announced to the student body, "This undergraduate has within him the seed of a first-rate scholar, but whether the seed will sprout or lie fallow depends on himself. if he is willing to be pulverized by the constant friction of hard work and stringent rules, luscious fruit will result from the seed of his dead self. Henry, not understanding the meaning of these words, turned to the young man who had acted as his guide and questioned him. "Dear companion, tell me more about this graduate school and the higher studies one pursues there." "The science learned in the advanced school of holiness," said the young man, "is nothing else than a complete, perfect resignation of oneself, so that a man's will is so evenly balanced that the scale turns neither to the right nor left, when God places on it joy or suffering, directly or through creatures. Man must strive earnestly to remain as steadfast in this total renunciation of self as is possible to human weakness, and to look only at God's honor and glory, imitating in this Christ's continual hunger for his heavenly Father's glory." This explanation satisfied Henry. Hence he resolved to put it in practice, cost what may, and to submit to all the school's regulations. After a few minutes, Henry returned to himself and sat for a long time pondering on these truths, which are but a reiteration of Christ's own doctrine. His musing found expression in self-reproach. "Look into the secret depths of your soul, and you will see that notwithstanding all your exterior penances, pride and self-love still rise in rebellion when you have to put up with a contradiction from others. You are like a scared rabbit hiding in a bush and trembling every time a leaf rustles in the breeze. This is how things stand with you. You shrink from sufferings which are not of your own seeking. The sight of uncongenial people makes you grow pale. You fly from humiliation, rejoice in praise, and avoid blame. Strike the iron while it is hot, and enroll in the advanced school of holiness." Isn't that a wonderful story? What it talks to us about is Maitreya's mystery school, the ancient mystery schools on Atlantis, which at the hour of the sinking of Atlantis or some time before were withdrawn to the etheric octave, the etheric retreats that we journey to at night and where we study under the ascended masters were once physical, not only on Atlantis but in other parts of the world. Most of them have been withdrawn, if not all of them. And as an experiment in the 20th century, the Ascended Masters and the Karmic Board determined to give it one more try. And that one more try is Maitreya's Mystery School here at the Royal Teton Ranch. It is the attempt to bring back into the physical octave the Masters, their teachings, their path, and to give an opportunity for all light bearers of the world whose time has come to graduate from Earth's schoolroom. The visions and locutions of the Christian mystics sometimes include specific directions, rebukes, and consolations. For example, Teresa of Avila said that one day Jesus commanded her to establish a new monastery. He made great promises that it would be founded, she writes, and that he would be highly served in it. He said it should be called St. Joseph's. On another occasion, Jesus chided Teresa for failing to write down the insights he gave her. He said, "Don't neglect to write down what I say, for even though it may not benefit you, it can benefit others." Keep your spiritual journal. Keep that journal and write down what Jesus tells you every day. When you are careful and treat his words preciously and the words of your Holy Christ self, and when you are attentive and set aside time for listening, following your evening decrees at home, and you simply sit and meditate and pray and invoke the presence of Jesus, write down what comes to you. Don't make the decision then and there that it is absolutely correct in the Word of God, but write it down and see what follows in your life. See what comes of it. Let experience be the test of the accuracy of what you are hearing. and so develop this ongoing communion. And you will find as you move on in years and you become mature and wise in the teachings and you are counseling others and you thumb through your notebook, you will find all kinds of precious words and gems to give to others. Henry Zuzo's biography records that on the feast of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin, he was given a glimpse of heaven, but when he tried to enter, an angel stayed him with the words, "Sorry, brother, but you will have to atone for your misdeeds before gaining admittance." Without further ado, the angel led Henry over a twisted path to a dark cave, so narrow he could barely turn around. Did you ever have a dream like that? You were in this place that was getting narrower and narrower. Left alone in this prison, he spent the night grieving and bemoaning his pitiable condition. In the morning, the angel returned and said, "How do you feel?" "Awful, awful," sobbed Henry. The angel said, "The Queen of Heaven is very irritated at your conduct. And that is why you are imprisoned here." Startled by this information, Henry asked, "Poor me, and in what have I offended Her Majesty?" "You have repeatedly shown yourself unwilling to preach on her feast days," the angel said. "And yesterday, on the feast of her Assumption, you refused to preach even though your prior appointed you to do so." "But dear angel," Henry explained, "it is because I consider myself unworthy of telling her praises, and I feel that the older fathers could do far better than I, a poor wretch." "Take my word for it," the angel said. "Her Majesty prefers your halting words to the eloquence of your elders." Half choked with tears, Henry blurted out, "Dear angel, speak to Her Majesty in my behalf, for I promise never again to falter in her praises." The angel smiled, led Henry out of his prison, and on the homeward way told him, "Basing my statement on what Her Majesty has told me about you, I tell you that she will receive you indulgently and show herself a gracious mother." And so it came to pass, as the angel said. Now I come to a very precious portion of this teaching of our dear Saint Germain in his embodiment as Christopher Columbus. As you know, this is 1992, the 500th anniversary of Christopher Columbus discovering the West Indies. So it is a great year of celebration, and see where we have come from those 3 small ships, the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria. So this is what Christopher Columbus went through. He went through his purgation and his illuminative stage. He had profound mystical experiences that illustrate both, and they show the consolations that can come to the true mystic. It was on his return to Spain after discovering the New World that Columbus first heard the celestial voice, which was to comfort him throughout his career. During his 3rd voyage, Columbus described this voice. "The day after Christmas, 1499, after everyone had left me, I was attacked by Indians and ill-disposed Christians, and was placed in such an extremity that I had to flee for my life in a small caravel. Then the good Lord helped me, saying, 'O man of little faith, fear not, for I am with thee.' And the Lord scattered my enemies and showed me how I might fulfill my vows." During his 4th voyage to the New World, Columbus was faced with unrelenting hardships. First, he was caught in such a severe storm that he called it a second deluge. "Everything was worn out," he wrote, "ships and men alike. My old wound opened, and for 9 days I saw myself lost, without hope of life. He finally landed and repaired his ships as best he could, but soon met again with contrary winds and currents. The ships were no longer seaworthy, and the crews were mortally sick and exhausted, he wrote. His ships struggled to a safe harbor, but the men could not go ashore for a whole month because of unceasing rain. I do not know whether any other man has suffered such torment, said Columbus. But his troubles did not stop there. The crew was short on provisions, and they also encountered a waterspout, which Columbus said would have drowned them if they had not broken it by reciting from the Gospel according to St. John. Columbus decided to leave 80 men behind to found a colony and take the others back with him to Spain. But as he was departing, he heard the sounds of Indians attacking the men on shore. This continued for 3 hours, while high winds and waves prevented him from going ashore to help them. That night, he saw bodies floating toward him in the water. In this moment of despair, Columbus wrote to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, "I was outside and all alone on this very dangerous coast with a high fever and greatly exhausted. There was no hope of rescue. In this state, I climbed in pain to the highest point of the ship and called in tears and trembling to your highnesses, mighty men of war in all the 4 corners of the earth, for succor, but none of them answered me. At length, groaning with exhaustion, I fell asleep, and I heard a most merciful voice saying, 'O fool, so slow to believe and to serve thy God, the God of all. What more did he do for Moses or for his servant David? He has had thee in his care from thy mother's womb. When he saw thee a grown man, he caused thy name to resound most greatly over the earth. He gave thee the Indies, which are so rich a part of the world, and thou hast divided them according to thy desire. He gave thee the keys to the gates of the ocean, which were held with such great chains. Turn thyself to him and acknowledge thy sins. His mercy is infinite. Thine old age shall not prevent thee from achieving great things, for many and vast are his domains. Thou criest for help with doubt in thy heart. Ask thyself, who has afflicted thee so grievously and so often, God or the world? The privileges and covenants which God giveth are not taken back by him. Whatever he promises, he fulfills with increase, for such are his ways. Thus have I told thee, said the voice, what thy Creator has done for thee and for all men. He has now revealed to me some of those rewards which await thee for the many toils and dangers which thou hast endured in the service of others. Columbus said, I heard all this as though in a trance, but I could find no reply to give to so sure a message, and all I could do was to weep over my transgressions. Whoever it was that had spoken ended by saying, Fear not, but have faith. All these tribulations are written upon tablets of marble, and there is a reason for them. Remember that when you face adversity, when you cannot comprehend how God would do such a thing to you, as Columbus thought. But it is we who do it to ourselves, by our karma, or the world that does it to us and God allows it, for we must also endure the persecutions of Christ. We must weather the storms of life and recognize that God put us in his ship in this world and that he will see us to the other shore. If we keep on striving, if we are not daunted by what anyone says about us or what anyone throws in our pathway, know who you are, know what you are, know God lives in you. Take your stand for what you believe in, and don't be embarrassed to pursue your mission. Walk in the footsteps of Christopher Columbus. Discover a new world for people. Discover new dimensions of being. Discover them and make your charts and maps so clear that when you give this teaching to others, they can enter that world because you have so clearly defined it in your meditations and in your communions with God. This experience of our beloved Saint Germain is a hallmark in the annals of purgation and the dawn of illumination from God which followed it.
For more information on the mystical paths of the world's religions, call toll-free 1-800-323-5228. The preceding program was presented by Summit University, Box A, Livingston, Montana, 59047-1390. If you'd like to know more, call this number or write this address. For your free copy of Elizabeth Clare Prophet's best-selling book, The Human Aura, call this toll-free number, 1-800-323-5228. This is a limited-time offer, so call now for your free book. That's 1-800-323-5228.